go ahead and get started. If people straggle in, they can straggle in. I was just kind of mentioning a little bit, this is a weird conference for us to present at, because not because we don't do big data or we do a lot of data analysis or serving out data or analyzing the data in our business, but obviously esports is kind of the latest and greatest. You pull up the Wall Street Journal and so got $10 million in esports. And we feel a little bit these days like the .com era. I say this to our guys all the time, who got $10 million, just go look at their business plan, what in the world do they do, how are they going to make money? They just have the name esports in their name. However, it is very obvious to hopefully everybody in the room that everybody knows at least somebody or is connected to somebody that is a gamer. The gamers are out there and the gamers are competing, and for those of us that are older and grew up feeding coins into machines in the mall, you want to try to get your name in that leaderboard. And I don't care if it cost me $72 to get my name at the top of Super Pac-Man. I'm going to keep trying it over and over and over. And now the best part about our business is that gamers want their names on those leaderboards, and they'll allow you to track just about anything on them. We just were talking about that a little bit. My takeaway from another session was we got to remember to be careful with the little kids grabbing too much of their information if they're under the age of 13, because everybody comes into our buildings and the people we work with to play, and we have to be careful about all those laws with the younger kids. So I have a little cool app. Nobody in this room's used it all day, so I'm the first guy to use it, but allegedly I can change the slides with my phone. We were practicing it earlier. So our company, I'm just going to give you a little brief background. I apologize if this is elementary for a lot of people if you know a little bit about esports, but I'm going to spend probably 3 or 4 slides just explaining what esports is. I wish somebody would have done that with me with big data to start the conference. Let's just go through the basics. Let's talk about a couple keywords, a couple examples of how this works. And so basically, I have a couple slides. I'm a visual guy. I really like to show pictures. So I looked up the word sport, and a sport is an activity involving physical exertion. This is where esports is a little bit questionable, and skill, in which an individual or team competes against another or others for entertainment. So basically what I talked about earlier, Pac-Man, Jim Mack and I could go to the Pac-Man machine. We could both be in quarters. We could try to beat each other. To me, that is an e-sport. It is a competition. It doesn't have to be played for money, just like a lot of us play basketball for not money because we're not good enough to get in the NBA. Sports are sports. It is a competition, and e-sports is no different. To me, it is all about the bringing people together. I love the team side of it. I love the camaraderie. I love to see this going into colleges. It is a competition, a contest, a tournament, and it's multiple levels. And that's the part that a lot of people don't realize yet, because esports in the Wall Street Journal is $28 million tournament was just won, and 4 kids or 5 kids walked away with $2 million apiece. That's what everybody reads about esports. However, esports, to me, is going to be this underlying foundation that's built up from the elementary to the high school, middle school, up into the collegiate level, and there'll be a lot of people that compete that don't make it pro and don't make a lot of money. I put a couple of funny things down here too, because to get that accepted, it's weird, because there are games that are competitive games in esports that have some weird things with it, with guns and killings and things. So there's a game that's really popular called Counter-Strike. One team's terrorists and one team's counter-terrorists. Your objective is one team has hostages, and you have to, I don't see that game being played in any high school that I know in America in the next 5 to 10 years, or wherever maybe. But there are games that are very applicable, like Rocket League. I don't know if you've heard of Rocket League, but you basically control this remote control car, and there's a soccer ball, and you're trying to score a goal, the other team's goal. There is no blood in it, there is a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, and it's easy for spectators to pick up on and watch. A funny phrase I always think about, so as a guy that grew up playing basketball in high school and college, I practiced all the time. I was always in the driveway, I was always practicing, I always went to every open gym, I went to every playground. You don't ever hear that in esports, my mom never said, hey, you're outside playing basketball too much, that's bad for you. But you hear that in esports a lot, because there is a lot of negativity surrounding video games and being in your basement and who you're playing with online. To me, again, esports is getting together, organizing with your coaches, with your teams at the high school level, and in a practice environment where you're interacting and not online with strangers. Okay, where is esports? And I'm going to give you a couple examples of all these. This may seem funny to a lot of people as we name them up, but obviously people play from home a lot. Playing with mobile phones is really big now. There's a couple big esports games on mobile phones. I saw Candy Crush has a TV show now. That's, to me, is not esports, but schools and universities, bars, there's a lot of esports bars springing up where you go to watch competitions and play in competitions. Casinos, a lot of casinos have been calling us lately to add it in, not for gambling. Some of them want to make it gambling based, but a lot of these casinos are like family entertainment parks. They're putting in rope swings and trapezes and water parks and things as a resort, and they want to add this in there as well. Retail stores like what I own in Terre Haute, we have a center where you go and you just show up, and that's what it all is. It's just to play. Stadiums are adding it in. The Pacers, I don't know if you guys know this, but they're adding esports. They're hiring their first esports manager and their first 5 paid athletes that will represent them next season. It starts in March. They're building $1 million facility behind Bankers Life, connected to Bankers Life for their team to practice in. Trade shows, we do this at Gen Con, at PopCon, at Comic Con and things. Resorts are big. Schlitterbahn Water Park from Texas, which is my favorite place to volunteer to go work at. They're putting one into their water park. Senior centers have been big. A lot of them want the active things like the Wii Sports and things, but again, they want it to be a regular night. They all get together and they see who can have the best score. Theaters, we're outfitting a theater right now, taking a screen out of their 12-screen theater and replacing it with an esports arena. Theme parks, like I mentioned, FECs, family entertainment centers. If you've been to laser tag or mini golf or climbing walls, trampoline parks, all of those are looking for additional things to add in. Libraries have added them in. Sports parks, just like the stadiums, we've talked a lot of those. And esports stores, specifically just for esports, are starting up now. And we're all over the world, so a lot of the stuff that we're working with is connecting all of these people from all over the world, and there's a ton of data. Who is esports? It's quickly becoming everybody. It's not just Candy Crush, but it's CSGO, Counter-Strike, and everything in between. I mean, I'll say this with a grain of salt a little bit because you'll see stats as you go online, and everybody loves to claim that there's a lot of females in esports, okay? There is not a lot of females in esports, and I'm not saying that to be down talking females or that females can't do it. There's just not a lot in it. Every event we've ever ran, we've never had more than maybe one female be on a team or whatever in the professional, highly competitive level. Now, when we run Gen Con, I don't know, was that a month ago, we have a lot of events at Gen Con, and in those events at Gen Con where it was more casual, it wasn't for money and it was just for trophies and medals, a lot of the teams were mixed with a lot of boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, brother, sister combos. So it's a lot more exciting to see girls play, but at the pro level, you just do not see that many female players yet. And there's tons of data and growth. I was going to throw in some stats just to give you an idea if you don't know this. Esports in the next probably 3 to 4 years will be $1 billion industry. Not video games, because video games already is like crazy, like 22 billion or something. We're talking just esports, tournaments and things that have to do with esports. All right. Just a quick background on me. We opened our first center 13 years ago. We were running tournaments in our church basement. So I would have all the youth group come in and they would bring all their Xboxes in and we would line them up on either side of the church basement and we would play all night long. And we're hauling around these humongous TVs and it was a lot of work and I was getting older and I didn't want to stay up all night. So we had some extra space, opened up space and just charged money for people to come in and play and held tournaments every weekend. Since then, we've worked with a lot of the major tournament circuits. We travel all over and work with a bunch of the different events that pop up here and there. In 2008, we began hosting tournaments between centers in the U.S., and this is really where our data and our software kind of kicked in, is that we started realizing that we needed to automate the process for these competitions between all the players. So in 2013, we began a software project that connected the players at all these locations all around the world. When they show up and they play games like normal and they earn these little coins. Think of it like Chuck E. Cheese or Dave & Buster's where you can take your little tickets up and redeem them for something that you can never save enough tickets for, and somebody tries to save it up for the Nintendo at the top and they never can. We do that in a virtual world, but we create a competition out of it in a leaderboard so you can figure out if you're the best player at your local store, in your state, in your region, in your country, or all over the world. So right now, I think I have this in a slide later, but we've got about 320 centers that are connected with it, about 300,000 players. And the data that we're starting to be smart about grabbing is pretty crazy that we can watch and figure out how to serve up advertisements for certain sponsors that are trying to reach this audience. So esports provides unique data opportunities. Players want to be tracked. You know, so a lot of businesses out there, like a coffee shop or somebody, they do rewards cards, and you try to encourage your customers to share their visits with you and reward them for those visits. The opposite is true with esports. Everybody wants you to track them. They want to see their name. They want to see how good they are. They don't always want it to be on the leaderboard, because if they did poorly, they don't want to see their bad score, but at the same time, they don't mind you tracking all of that data. That's what they're used to in games. They're very open about putting their information in, which is why we have to be careful with a lot of the younger kids and making sure mom and dad knows that they're putting their name in, and first name, last name, birthday, and those sort of things. They're very open with sharing that data and how often they play. They play a lot. We start at the device level where the gaming is executed. So we have a client that loads onto a PC that runs these stores, and that way it controls access to Windows. It replaces the Windows shell. The player logs in, and we can track things like some of the new stuff we're working on is Tobii eye tracking is built into a lot of these laptops, where it watches the gamer's eyes, and we can see in our interface if the gamers are looking at a certain place on our interface more than others. So if we're trying to promote a new game or something that's not getting enough attention, we can see if the eyeballs just glance over if they're there for a long period of time. And it's not always about the player. So a lot of the other data we grab is real interesting to partners like NVIDIA and Alienware. So these stores all over, we don't own these stores. We don't own these PCs in any of these stores. They're independent business owners that use our software to help manage their center and to help track all these stats. But we can grab and aggregate that data for partners and say, listen, you know, out of all of our stores, how many are running AMD and how many are running Intel processors? How many are running at what frames per second versus another one? What type of machine is being used more than another? What type of screen is on that? What size of screen? And then we like to turn the data into a game in itself. So some of the stuff we're working on, for example, is we're trying to add achievements for the gamers to play at different stations around the store. So if you walk into a facility and you have certain stations that don't get used that much, you can do a discount on that. You know a guy who lives in the seat, like Norm from Cheers. He walks in, everybody knows his name, you better get out of the seat because he sits in the same seat. That happens all the time at these centers. And you can actually do incentives and track that data and see how many hours he sits there. I mean, it's sometimes depressing, but it's kind of fun. I just wanted to share, since it is the Big Data Conference, I wanted to share some numbers with you, some interesting things we're working on. So because we have this product that is all about video gaming and esports, and we've met some partners, and we just did this Best Buy project this January. So we're in 50 Best Buy locations with 7 machines in each. So we have 350 machines that launched earlier this year. And it's a kiosk mode, but it's not like, for any of you and most of you maybe in the computer field, but Windows ships with their own retail node that you can enable. If you go into any store, retail store, 99% of the time it's running this demo Windows mode. It's called, like, I think RDX. You can disable it if you know the password to get out, but most of the retailers run that. What Alienware hired us to do is put ours in, and it allows the gamers to walk up and interact and actually launch a real game. We launched Project Cars. And the gamer can then race with the game, and it times them to 15 minutes and then kicks them off and back into the attract mode for the kiosk. The interesting thing with that is that because we're tracking all kinds of stuff at the local PC, we can tell Alienware and Dell and Best Buy how many times a player has walked up and touched any key on the keyboard or has clicked the mouse. We can tell how long they've interacted with it. We time it out after a certain period of time, so we know how many minutes they interacted with it before our timeout kicks in. We can track how many played the games, how long they played the games, and we can send all that back to them, and then they can match that up against their sales data, which they don't ever share with me, which I'm sure is probably a lot, but they can say, okay, on this particular game, on this particular kiosk facing this particular direction in the Best Buy store, we had a much higher sales rate, and then they can look at our thing and say why. You know, like, what game was it? Should we put that game? The gentleman in the session before us was talking about the same stuff. You know, you want to change your sales strategies based on what's working and what's not working. They're looking to do some expansions with that. It's a very basic. They're very interesting to work with. They're very careful about what game selection could be in there. We gave them a list of like 100 games, and all of them they threw out the window at first. Because of one reason or another, we had to settle on Project Cars because it's a racing game. It was very E. For movie people, it's very PG rated. So they don't offend anybody, they don't break any rules. We're working with Office Depot and a couple other retail locations now to maybe get to be able to do a couple different games. This is just an example of how we're integrating esports in an environment that you may not think it. Obviously, they're selling gaming computers, so it makes sense to do that. But you can really use a lot of players' attraction to games to bring them into any kind of experience for any kind of business. Obviously, we're working with the publishers. We have a deal we're working on now. We can't say who, but we're going to work on having versions of their game available. They're starting to see that if we're at this level, we could possibly give them data for that our players will log in our terms of service and privacy policy will make them agree to tracking their aggregate habits, playing certain games, certain times of the day, how many hours, how long, what are they playing, what style are they playing, and they'll give us different versions of those games that the players can't play at home. So for example, with a lot of these games, they're free to play now. You have to pay to unlock players, but they'll give us a version of the game where in our locations, all of the players will be unlocked. So you can come in and try out all the players, which will give incentive to the players to come to these locations and play and share their data with these companies to make the games better. How old are they? Are they male? Are they female? How much do they spend in game? How much do they spend in our store on snacks? Coca-Cola is always interested in a lot of that stuff. We use it at conventions and trade shows. This one is really hard because we have to work on speed. We're doing this as well on a project in New York. For the next 8 weeks for the holiday season, they want to build one of these temporary in New York City, and they want people to come in for free, play in these esports events to put their eyeballs in front of sponsors. And we're talking the Geicos and the Coca-Colas and things, not necessarily gaming sponsors. So in those cases, we're really limited in what we can gather because we're trying to move so many people through the space, just like at Gen Con. Can't really take a lot of time getting a lot of personal details, so we try to get minimum just so we can get the most amount of people through the room. We're also doing things in events with people that turn spectators into players, which is a little bit of what you mentioned beforehand. As you get a big event, you have all these players in the room. A really cool example is a game called Obliteracers. It's made by this little Australian development firm. It's a great bar game. You can put it up on a wall, and basically a little tiny computer will run it on a projector on the wall, and it has a QR code on it. Everybody in the room can take their phone up, scan the QR code on their phone, and it turns their phone sideways and allows them to have a joystick, and they're playing a Mario Kart style race game on the big screen. 16 players can play at once, which sounds strange for those of us that are gamers, because how do you fit that on the game? Well, the game style is you fall too far behind, and you get kicked out of the game, and it's the last man standing, king of the hill style. As soon as it gets done, it resets, everybody can scan and try again. You can see that becoming an attraction in any kind of business, in any kind of retail environment. Nothing to do with selling that game or selling anything else or even technology. But if you also then add in a piece where, okay, you can play this game and it's fine, but make sure you give me your first name and last name, your birth date, a couple different pieces of information about you, maybe your email so I can send you something later. And then Collegiate Esports, we just got back from Canada. We installed at a university up there. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. Universities are now adding in official programs and scholarshiping players. So we installed UCI about a year ago. We're doing 5 or 6 now that have built actual arenas with a lot of people calling and asking. They're really, again, using it to engage the student body and to make sure that they're offering things at their campus to be competitive with other campuses. So eventually in a year or two, they don't want to be the school that does not have an esports program, because a lot of students will pick that school based on that. Not because we're going to go play for IU basketball, but because we love IU basketball and we go there and we play in the rec team and there's a rec center that we can go play intramural ball at, and I can be the superhero of the intramural team, and then I can go to cheer on the IU basketball team every Tuesday and Saturday. The same sort of thing will happen with esports. I mean, whether we like it or not, our kids are playing this and watching this on their phones, and this is what they do for entertainment. That is why Twitch is so big. That is why YouTube is getting so big. I don't know why it's fun to watch somebody else play a game. None of you in this room are young enough so I can say this without offending anybody, but that is what they do now. They sit and they'll watch people play, and they'll want to watch these players play. I'm talking fast to get through this, but if anybody has any questions, stop me. So the thing that we encourage all of them is to use it as a multi-purpose, including the student body. So don't just build it for the 5 varsity players. Use that facility when they're building it to get the student body. And then La Trobe in Australia is a university. I think they have a really unique model. They actually have, I don't know how many it is for sure, maybe 5 or 10 in each dorm. So they've basically gone in and replaced, like for those of us that lived on campus, you remember there was always like a pool table or a ping pong table. So they've gone in and they've replaced put in 5 to 10 systems in each of the dorms, and the students can use that to compete and to play against each other in the dorm or against other players in the other dorms around campus. My phone keeps going to sleep. Theaters and family entertainment centers, we talked about that a little bit earlier. We're launching our first one next month. Any of these people that are trying to reach millennials, like how do we get the millennials engaged? The easiest thing to do is to talk about esports, to talk about video games. I haven't said this word yet, but I know everybody in this room knows Minecraft. I mean, Minecraft is big, and it's been out forever, and it's gross looking, it's not graphically pleasing, but it is a crazy phenomenon with 5-year-olds all the way up to 25, 30-year-olds, and they understand it, and they cannot, it's like, I don't know if I can say this, but it's like cocaine, like they can't walk by it without taking a hit off it, or they got to at least watch the person playing it, like you walk in a restaurant, if one kid's on a tablet playing it, then my kids have got to walk by and ask him what he's doing, This is what these companies are trying to do. Not as many of these millennials and younger kids really want to go watch movies anymore. They'll go a few times a year, but it wasn't like when we were kids where the only place to go watch a movie was at the movie theater. They're trying to figure out how they can use esports, so we're converting a couple of their screens. What else we got here? All right, so goals of using data in esports. So specific to big data in esports, CRM, of course, is big. Customer retention, you want to bring back the customers. We know so much about their play style. We know what games they're playing. What we want a lot of our clients to do is use that data to reach out to those customers and bring them back. So if we see that you play Counter-Strike every day on Tuesday, and that's the only day you come in, then we try to get you back in with a coupon to play Counter-Strike on Thursday. Using that data to try to reach out and bring those customers back in with their currency. What it is that they play, what it is that they like to play. If they're a tournament player, then invite them back to the next tournament. If they're not a tournament player, invite them to a fun night where you're just going to do free pizza. Obviously, social media integration. This is a really, really big one. Everybody that's in the marketing and social media, it's really hard to reach people on social media and spam tag them without them getting irritated. Everybody in here used to sign up with Facebook. Now you can almost by default check, this does not have permission to post on my page. How does everybody know that, right? These gamers don't care. If we give them an option to say, post my achievements about my game online, every one of them would do it. Because they're like, hey, I hit level whatever in this game, and we make it official. Like our system makes it an official tweet coming out from us, tagging them, or we post for them on their Facebook page or tag them on ours. They don't mind that at all. In fact, they love it. It gives them accreditation. It gives them the feeling of accomplishment. They become the high school basketball star, but just in their video game. Universities use it for research. UCI has been really doing a good job out at their facility of using it for research. They'll do tests. They were telling me about one they did where they brought the gamers in and they did some testing on the reaction time and things, and then they had to play 4 hours of games straight, and then they tested all their reaction time again, and they're also talking about doing those similar tests with them with the school environment. Like if you play video games for 8 hours one night and then you come in the next morning and take an English test, how does that English test score compared to when you didn't? And surprisingly, it's not bad. Other than the fact that they probably could have studied more instead of playing, it doesn't really ruin that. Quality control for game companies is big. A lot of these game companies with new versions coming out and things really will put it out there and get the players involved, but they got to have the data back. They're not looking for people to just play their game and market it. They sometimes are, but a lot of times they're like, give us that feedback. We're going to need to know when you play, what you play, how you play, so that we need to make changes to the game. If there's certain bugs, we need to know all about your play styles. And then obviously sales and marketing for brands. We just released a new version of our software. It's not a plug for us, but we want the centers to be able to put ads in there for whoever they can sell an ad to. For us, if you're in another country, Coca-Cola or Pepsi, maybe the debate, they can go out and sell that to Coca-Cola or Pepsi at their location. We're going to be able to do that. All right, that is it in a nutshell. I wanted to get through it in half an hour, and I did it. I have tons of other stuff I can share about it, but I know it's the end of the day, and I know everybody wants to get out and enjoy wherever you're going next. I don't know, is there a closing thing at the end? Does everybody have to stay for that or not? I don't know. He's not staying. Does anybody have any questions about anything? I flew through them. Yes?
Do you worry about Steam coming in and eating up your business?
I worry about Steam coming in. We're starting to get calls from those companies that want to integrate with us and control us. That's what we're trying to avoid at all costs because we really want to stay independent. We want to stay independent of any of the game companies. So far to this point, we have a great relationship with all the game companies because we don't sell the games. You have to own the game to be able to play it, and we control license management. We're very strict with that. We can actually distribute it for them in countries that they don't have a very good distribution platform in. So far it's been a great relationship. I mean, again, we're in business to make sure the games are out there and we're tracking data from the players playing all the different games. We really don't want to become married to any one of the game companies. In fact, we really use them against each other as much as we can. Like Blizzard called us, we call Riot to let Riot know that Blizzard called us. And when Valve calls us, we call EA to let them know, and Microsoft and Sony, and we're really good at that. Because I'm like, half the time they don't answer the phone, but if they, Microsoft will take my call if I tell them Sony called. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah?
What theaters are you going in?
I think I can say, we're going into, so theaters are owned by a ton of people, but there's big chains that are owned by a couple big companies out of China that we're not working with. We're working with independent folks, so we're working with Peoria, Illinois first as our test. There's a 1,200 theater ownership group called NADA, which is really weird, National Association of Theater Owners. And they're interested in this type of conversion in their independent theaters. We'll see. It makes a lot of sense to me. As a guy that's ran his own store in Terre Haute for 13 years, it's a struggle to run a store that does nothing but esports. To me, it makes sense to add esports into existing businesses where they have management, they have overhead, they have electricity, and they have concessions and everything figured out. I'd love to have food and beer at my store, but I am not a food guy. I'm so scared of the health inspector. Putting in a kitchen scares me. I just know people are going to knock on the door and go back over the white glove and close me down. I'm not clean. My employees would not be that clean.
Are the on the theaters, are the games going to show on the big screen?
Yeah, we're going to leave the theater screen because I want to use it as an asset. Plus the theater owners are babies and scared. They think that we'll try this for 6 months and we'll need to turn it back to the theater. We're just going to use the theater screen. What we do in our stores is we'll put screens around the room to show leaderboards and show Twitch and show game streams and things. We're just going to split the theater screen into 4. So we'll be able to show different data. We're going to face most of the seats towards the theater screen. I've even told the theater owners, I would, for a certain price, go in and pay and have a movie running while we're playing. Like opening weekend of Star Wars, you want to watch Star Wars. But if there's a chance to do this other thing after I've seen Star Wars a couple times and go in and have like a game thing going on with Star Wars running like 8 weeks after it was out, you can probably upsell that and partner with the movie companies to do that. Doesn't that sound awesome? I mean, it sounds fun. And old movies, you can do that all the time. You get a Back to the Future marathon one night, that'd be awesome. Play games all night with that thing running on the screen. Yes?
Do you run into any issues with the software and anti-cheating software?
Well, not for us, because we lock everything down. Now, the reverse of that is that we have it so locked down that there's legitimate partners that we want to put in there that we've got to build around, like Civo has a client for anti-cheating in Counter-Strike. Our thing locks it down, too much it won't work. So we want the good software to be able to be installed. We've just taken the stance to begin with that we just lock it all down and then we'll unlock it for the appropriate ones. USB, everything's disabled, so you can't come in and load anything on any PC that's running the software. A lot of these are like, again, Best Buy in a retail environment. An employee working there probably doesn't care. So in fact, the employee may be the one that's in there trying to, I got to get on a Facebook account, or watch YouTube all day instead of selling it Alienwares. Yeah, go ahead.
So you completely lock down the entire OS environment and just treat it as a uninteractive shell based on the
Yep, so it boots up and basically the first thing they see is you have to log in your name and password. Now the kiosk mode boots up, there's no name and password, but it is just a 5-menu button interactive display. You can launch a video, you can launch the game, you can read some about the PC specs. It's all built in Unity is what we use for it, so it is really cool. And it was not easy. And it was, yeah, go ahead in the back.
So what's your target demographic for the physical locations? With the advent of cheaper computing power, what incentive does a person have for going to the store versus playing at home?
It's a great example. Yeah, so when we opened in 2004 through 2008 or 9, we lived and died off the fact that we had awesome internet, great PCs, the games that were coming out required new stuff. Then nowadays it is all about the events and the competition. That is what esports is all about. What you cannot do at home, and again, with a 17-year-old son, I see the difference of him interacting with his team in my store playing physically together versus what they do online with their headsets with who knows who online. So, you know, in the gaming world, we call it trolling people. Like, online servers are full of nothing but trashy trolls, and it is miserable for anybody that wants to go play because your ears are full of either a little kid or an older guy or whatever. When you start getting into competitions, the other thing is that I always use this example. I always go back to basketball. But in basketball, every time I went to a competition, whether it was high school or college, I knew the floor was going to be the same dimensions. I knew the hoop was always 10 feet. I knew how far the free throw line was. They were always the same. With technology, I don't know that we'll ever be to the point where 10 players in a game, 5-on-5, at 10 different locations will be exactly the same. So all of the big professional tournaments and anything that's legitimate in competitions are always done in-house, at least with a full team on local network. Because the response time and the latency, no matter how small you can get that down, in a lot of these video games, it does make a big difference. So that is the big thing that we tell a lot of these teams is, we'll have a competition between a LAN center in California and one in New York. And if the teams are all at the store, it's as even as we can get, you know, versus the team from LA flying to New York and being physically on the LAN. So we want to add that layer of competition that's equal as can be without players having to travel. Because unless you're going to win $10,000 or $20,000, nobody can afford to fly all over. We want you to be able to go to your local center or your high school or your college as a team, all five together on one side of an island, working together and communicating against a team in another location. So that's our big push, but it is, I mean, in some of these countries that we work with, it's still, I mean, they have asked us to put the ability in to burn CDs. Like, how many people in this room has burnt a CD in the last, I don't even know when. I don't have a drive, any kind of drive for a CD in any of my devices anymore. You know, I mean, but these other countries, some of them are 5 or 6 years behind us, and they don't have that stuff at home, and so they go to the LAN centers for what we originally started with. But again, they'll morph because everybody will catch up eventually. All right, what else? Everybody ready to party? Good? All right, thanks everybody for coming in.